Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're taking on something pretty heavy, the Alabama Department of Corrections, ADOC. It's a system really in deep crisis.
Yeah, definitely. And what's interesting is you've got these two narratives sort of clashing.
Right. On one hand, you have this federal lawsuit just laying out systemic failure in stark detail, brutal stuff.
And on the other, you see this push for, well, really radical reform, activism from inside, a documentary, even proposals using open source AI. It's quite a contrast.
Yes. So our sources today, mainly the U.S. Department of Justice findings, the lawsuit documents, and this documentary, The Alabama Solution, they paint a really grim picture. Systemic violence, abuse, corruption across 13 men's prisons in Alabama.
And the core finding from the DOJ is that the conditions are unconstitutional, pervasive, systemic. And crucially, they found the state and ADOC have been deliberately indifferent.
Deliberately indifferent, meaning they knew.
They knew. They'd been notified about these exact problems going back to at least 2019, maybe 2020. And still the conditions persisted or worsened.
Wow. Okay, so our mission here is to unpack that failure, how bad it got, and then look at these attempts, these really bold attempts to force change and transparency.
Exactly. Understand the crisis and then the responses.
All right, let's get into it. Starting with the crisis itself. The DOJ lawsuit, it lays out four big areas, right? Four pillars of unconstitutional conditions.
That's right. The first one is just a fundamental failure,
Right.
failing to protect prisoners from prisoner-on-prisoner violence.
And the numbers on this are, well, they're shocking.
They really are. In 2018, the homicide rate in Alabama's men's prisons was 7 times the national average.
7 times.
Yeah. And you'd think maybe things would improve with attention, but no. System-wide homicides actually tripled between fiscal year 2015 and 2020, went from 5 up to 16.
Tripled. So it's getting more dangerous, not less.
Absolutely. It points to an environment of, well, chaos, not control.
So if you've got homicide rates that high and the sources linked a lot of this violence to things like contraband, drugs, debts, how is all that stuff getting in? Is it just poor security or
Yeah.
something else?
Well, the sources strongly suggest it's more than just weak security. There seems to be a deep-seated contraband economy.
Okay.
You see these patterns again and again. Violence driven by debts over drugs, meth, synthetic stuff, and weapons. We're talking about truly horrific incidents detailed in the reports.
Like what?
Like a prisoner being strangled because he thought there was a hit out on him, another stabbed through the eye. Just brutal.
Jeez.
And getting back to your point about control and complicity, ADOC often seems to lack transparency. Sometimes it looks like they deliberately misclassify deaths, calling obvious homicides natural causes.
Covering it up.
That's what it looks like. And that pattern of hiding the truth, that's what elevates it from just crime to a systemic constitutional failure. The state isn't just failing to stop it, it seems to be obscuring it.
Which leads directly into the second pillar, doesn't it? The failure to protect prisoners from sexual abuse by other prisoners.
Exactly. It's tragically linked. The scale here is also huge.
How huge.
Between late 2016 and April 2018, so less than 2 years, ADOC itself documented over 600 incidents they classified as sexual assault inmate on inmate.
Over 600. And that's just what got officially recorded.
Right. And reported assaults jumped dramatically between 2015 and 2017. The mechanism is often tied right back to that contraband economy we mentioned.
Drug debts again?
Yeah, drug debts, or sometimes victims being drugged, incapacitated with illicit substances, and then assaulted.
That's horrifying. But what about the staff response if someone reports this?
Well, this is where the culture really shows itself. The sources say staff sometimes just dismiss these serious allegations. They might call it homosexual activity, implying it was consensual,
Wow.
or they'll label it unsubstantiated if the victim doesn't want to press criminal charges, which is completely understandable given the fear of retaliation in there.
Of course.
And then, incredibly, victims who do report are often put into segregation, solitary confinement.
They punish the victim.
Effectively, yes. Punishing them for reporting the assault. It
Yeah.
sends a chilling message.
Okay, so that's violence and sexual abuse. The third failure point turns the lens onto the guards themselves. Excessive force by staff.
The DOJ found a pervasive pattern here, too. Security staff using force that's way out of proportion to the situation.
Even on people who aren't resisting.
Yes, against prisoners who are compliant or even already restrained.
Mm.
And it's not just about maintaining order. The report says it's often used for punishment or retaliation.
And they try to hide this too.
Oh, yeah. There are tactics, like placing an injured prisoner in segregation solitary again until the bruises heal so nobody sees, or just straight up falsifying the incident reports.
Are there specific examples cited?
Definitely. Grim ones. The death of a prisoner at Ventress Prison in 2019, blunt force trauma to the head. An officer breaking a compliant prisoner's arm with a baton during an intake search in 2020.
Breaking someone's arm during a search.
Yeah, and maybe most telling. One officer charged with assault in 2021 was later promoted. Twice.
Promoted after being charged with assault.
Twice. It suggests, a real institutional tolerance for this kind of violence from staff. Zero accountability, almost.
Okay, violence, sexual abuse, staff brutality, and the fourth failure, the physical conditions.
Right. Failure to provide safe and sanitary conditions. And this isn't just speculation. State officials themselves admitted that facilities have crumbling infrastructure.
Yeah.
They said they're structurally failing.
Crumbling infrastructure, that sounds bad, but what does it actually mean day to day?
It means dangerous, lethal neglect. Get this. According to the sources, not one of the 13 men's prisons has a fully functional fire alarm system.
Not one! That's insane.
Terrifying. And you've got systemic issues like exposed electrical wiring, raw sewage backing up into living areas. Bullock Prison was mentioned specifically for that. Constant flooding leading to mold, mildew.
So it's unhealthy and unsafe.
Dangerously so. There was a case at Donaldson Prison, December 2020. A prisoner died from hypothermia, heat stroke. His cell was recorded at over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, between 101 and 104 degrees.
He basically baked to death in his cell.
That's what hypothermia is, yeah. The building itself killed him.
So these four pillars, the violence, the abuse, the staff brutality, the deadly neglect, they paint a picture of total system failure. What's driving it all? What are the underlying causes?
Well, if you connect the dots, two massive issues jump out immediately. Overcrowding and understaffing. They enable everything else.
Let's talk numbers. How overcrowded are we talking?
Okay, so the 13 men's prisons were designed for roughly 9,500 people. As of late 2021, they were holding about 14,250.
Wow, that's almost 50% overcapacity system-wide. Are some worse than others?
Oh, much worse.
Right.
Staten Prison was reportedly at 265% occupancy. Kilby at 180%. Just jammed full.
2.5 times the design capacity. How can you even manage that?
Well, that's the thing. You can't. Especially when you combine it with the understaffing crisis.
How bad is the staffing?
Critically, dangerously low. In early 2021, ADOC had only filled about 1,365 correctional officers' jobs out of more than 3,100 they were authorized to have.
Less than half staffed.
Less than half. 8 of the prisons had vacancy rates over 50%. Bullock was at 60% vacant. Donaldson, where that prisoner died of heat stroke, 58% vacant.
So you've got way too many prisoners and way too few guards. How does that directly fuel those constitutional failures we talked about? Does it just create chaos, or does it enable the abuse?
It really does both. You have staff who are completely overwhelmed, overworked, probably undersupported. In that environment, excessive force can become, a substitute for actual control. Chaos management through violence.
Okay.
They simply can't oversee the population properly, which lets that contraband economy thrive. The drugs, the weapons, it all flows more easily. And that fuels the prisoner-on-prisoner violence and the sexual abuse tied to debts.
And you mentioned earlier, the sources suggest staff might even be involved in the contraband.
Yeah, the filmmakers behind the Alabama solution were pretty explicit about that. They assert that officers are often the ones supplying the illicit goods, the cell phones.
Yeah.
It's apparently a very lucrative trade.
So it's not just that they can't control it. There's potentially an incentive not to control it or even participate.
That's what's suggested. It's not just a failure of security. It could be active corruption woven into the system. Administrators ignoring it, or maybe worse.
Which brings us to another really dark aspect, the forced labor system. This sounds like something out of the 19th century.
It kind of is. Alabama's prison labor system generates something like $450 million in goods and services for the state every year.
$450 million annually. And the incarcerated people doing this work, what are they paid?
$2 a day.
$2 per day.
Per day. And get this, that wage rate, $2 a day, was set in 1927.
1927. They haven't raised the rate for forced prison labor in almost 100 years.
Apparently not. And this isn't just, making license plates inside the prison walls.
No. Where are they working?
The sources say they're shipped out daily.
Sure.
To work at state facilities, the governor's mansion, the state capitol building, but also for major private companies.
Private companies? Like who?
The sources mention Hyundai, specifically a plant there, a KFC franchise, a Budweiser distributor, major names using $2 a day labor.
Okay, hold on. These are people locked up, often under horrific, unconstitutional conditions, deemed too dangerous for parole. But they're safe enough to work at the governor's mansion and for Hyundai.
That's the profound irony, isn't it? The contradiction is just glaring.
And is there any connection between this labor program and their chances of getting out?
Yes, and it's grim. The data apparently shows that incarcerated people involved in this cheap labor program are statistically less likely to be granted parole.
Less likely. So working for $2 a day actually hurts their chances of release.
That's what the statistics suggest. It creates this perverse incentive for the state, right?
Okay.
Keep people locked up, keep them working for almost nothing, generating huge value, resisting oversight, resisting reform, resisting release. It all starts to make a kind of grim economic sense for the state budget.
Okay. That context, the economics, the incentive to maintain the status quo is crucial when we look at how the state responded to the federal pressure.
Absolutely. So faced with this damning DOJ lawsuit and federal mandate to fix things, what was Governor Ivey's big Alabama solution?
Build more prisons.
Bingo. Invest heavily in building 3 massive new prisons.
And where did the money come from? Not presumably from cutting the forced labor program.
No. The state diverted $400 million from federal COVID-19 relief funds.
COVID relief money to build prisons.
$400 million of it, plus
Yeah.
another $100 million taken from the state's education budget.
Education funding cut to build prisons while using COVID funds, that says a lot about priorities.
It really does. And this was all wrapped up in that classic tough-on-crime rhetoric. Predictably, around the same time, the state's parole rate absolutely plummeted, down 72% in the years after the DOJ findings came out.
So the response wasn't really addressing the violence, the abuse, the staffing, the conditions. It was just build more cages and make it harder to get out.
That seems to be the state's main strategy. Punitive containment, doubling down on incarceration, not tackling the root causes or the culture inside the existing prisons.
But there was resistance
Yeah.
from inside.
Absolutely. And it's remarkable, that documentary, The Alabama Solution, it exists only because of incredible bravery from incarcerated activists. People like Robert Earl Council, Melvin Ray.
What did they do?
They used contraband cell phones, the very things often fueling violence, remember, but they used them to secretly film conditions for 6 years, documenting the brutality, the decay, everything we've been talking about. They risked everything to get that footage out.
Using the tools of the system against itself, in a way.
Exactly. And their reporting, their organizing, it led to something huge in 2022.
The work strike.
The statewide prisoners' work strike. They used the only power they really had, their economic power, as $2 a day laborers to protest peacefully, demanding basic dignity, demanding an end to the exploitation.
How did the state respond to that?
According to the sources, brutally. The
Yeah.
strike lasted 11 days. It was broken by staff retaliation. Reports of withholding food, basically starving prisoners en masse, targeting the organizers, choking them.
Choking.
That's what's reported. A really violent suppression of peaceful protest.
So you have the state response, build more prisons. You have the inside resistance documentation and strikes met with violence. Is there another path being proposed?
There is, and it's fascinatingly different. It comes from outside, from an initiative led by Rosalind Warren called the AI for Humane Prison Reform Initiative.
AI. How does AI fit into prison reform? That sounds potentially dystopian.
It could be, right. But their proposal frames it differently, not primarily for surveillance, but for empowerment, education, and transparency, using tech for good, essentially.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What are the main parts of this proposal? It has 4 pillars, you said.
Yeah, 4 core ideas. The first is education for all, expand online college courses, vocational training inside prisons, and here's the AI part. Use AI tutors to give personalized instruction. Help people actually build skills, which is proven to reduce recidivism.
Okay, education makes sense. What's the second pillar?
Communication equity. This one directly tackles the crazy cost of prison phone calls.
Oh yeah, families getting gouged just to talk to loved ones.
Exactly. It's a huge financial burden, isolates people. So this proposal says, ditch the expensive proprietary VoIP phone systems the prisons use now. Replace them with open source alternatives, things like Asterisk or Jitsi-free secure software.
So break the monopoly that profits off keeping families connected. Use free software instead.
Precisely. Reduce that financial punishment. It's a really tangible idea.
Okay, education, communication, what's third?
AI-enabled safety and rehabilitation. This is where it gets more complex. They propose using open-source AI tools, but not just for watching people, for detecting violence or self-harm risk before they happen, flagging mental health crises.
Proactive safety using AI.
That's the idea. And maybe the most interesting bit, Using AI for restorative justice matching. Looking at an individual's history, their needs, their risks, and matching them with appropriate programs, maybe even victim offender mediation where suitable. Trying to shift from purely punitive to something genuinely therapeutic.
That's ambitious. Using AI for rehabilitation pathways. And the final pillar.
Empowering staff and transparency. This brings it back to the guards and the public. Use AI-driven data analytics to figure out why staff are burning out and leaving in droves. What factors contribute to high turnover? Address those root causes.
So using data to fix the staffing crisis, not just complain about it.
Right. And crucially, promote public accountability through open data dashboards. Let everyone see key metrics about safety, conditions, program participation, force transparency.
So it's a vision of using technology not just to lock down, but to open up. Data for rehabilitation and public scrutiny.
Exactly. It's a stark contrast to just building more walls and keeping everything secret.
Okay, so let's try to pull this all together. We've seen the reality exposed by the DOJ and activists. Systemic violence, abuse, neglect, all underpinned by this $2 a day forced labor system that creates a perverse economic incentive.
A truly broken, constitution-violating system.
Then we have the state's response. Spend hundreds of millions, including COVID relief and education funds, to build new prisons while parole rates plummet. More containment.
The build bigger cages approach.
And contrasted with that, you have this other vision. Using technology, specifically open source AI and communication tools, to push for education, rehabilitation, staff support, and radical transparency.
Right. So what does it all mean? I think the crisis in Alabama really boils down to this vicious cycle. You've got extreme overcrowding, dangerous understaffing.
Yeah.
That creates the conditions for unchecked violence.
Which is profitable.
Which is ultimately profitable because of the $450 million forced labor system. And the sources, especially the documentary, make it crystal clear. This brutality persists because of an official culture of secrecy, deliberate indifference, cover-ups.
And in that context, something like a contraband cell phone, usually seen as part of the problem, actually became the solution for activists trying to get the truth out.
Ironically, yes. It became the only tool they had for transparency, for piercing that veil of secrecy and showing the world what was happening. The fight really is about visibility and accountability.
And breaking that economic incentive that seems to drive so much of the neglect and resistance to change.
Absolutely. Yeah. And here's the really sobering final thought the sources leave you with. Are these conditions the forced labor, the official resistance to oversight, the investment in incarceration over rehabilitation? Are they unique to Alabama?
Or is this something we could see elsewhere?
Exactly. How much transparency, how much real enforceable accountability do we need nationwide to make sure that what's happening in Alabama doesn't become, as one observer worried, the American solution creeping into prison systems across the country?
A chilling question to end on. Something for all of you to think about.